is broadly aligned with the target of 4%, barring, of course, short-lived spikes. External financing requirements are very modest, and strong buffers should withstand any global spillovers. Public finances have been strengthened by buoyant tax revenues. The central and state governments and the Reserve Bank of India have mobilized policy actions on an unprecedented scale and scope to bring about this outcome. Equally, the selfless and tireless efforts of our unsung warriors among municipal and local bodies, healthcare, police and administrative personnel, philanthropic entities and civil society are praiseworthy. They remind us of a quote from Mahatma Gandhi: "The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others." I think this pandemic truly brought India together and could just be the moment of India's arrival as a global growth driver. Let me now turn to the deliberations of the Monetary Policy Committee, which met on 6th, 7th and 8th of December. Based on an assessment of the macroeconomic situation and outlook, the MPC voted unanimously to maintain the status quo with regard to the policy repo rate, and by a majority of 5:1 to retain the accommodative policy stance. Consequently, the policy repo rate remains unchanged at 4%, and the stance remains accommodative as long as necessary to revive and sustain growth on a durable basis and continue to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on the economy while ensuring that inflation remains within the target going forward. The marginal standing facility, that is MSF rate, and the bank rate remain unchanged at 4.25%. The reverse repo rate also remains unchanged at 3.35%. I would now like to dwell briefly on the MPC's rationale for maintaining status quo on the policy rate and the stance. Noting that the economic activity is broadly evolving in line with its assessment in October, the MPC was of the view that the sharp and sustained reduction in new COVID-19 infections and the rise in vaccination coverage are contributing to consumer confidence and business optimism. The prospects of economic activity are steadily improving, including for contact-intensive services that were hit hard by the pandemic. The MPC noted the supply-side measures taken by the government to contain food prices, as also calibrated reductions in central excise duties and state VAT on petrol and diesel. Crude oil prices have also softened since end November. These would alleviate to an extent the domestic cost push build-up. The recovery of aggregate demand hinges on private investment, which is still lagging. The MPC regarded the accentuation of headwinds emanating from global developments as the main risk to domestic outlook, which is now somewhat clouded by the Omicron variant of the COVID-19. Moreover, given the slack in the economy and the ongoing catching up of activity, especially of private consumption, which is still below its pre-pandemic levels, continued policy support is warranted for a durable and broad-based recovery. Against this backdrop, the MPC decided to retain the prevailing repo rate at 4% and continue with the accommodative stance. I would now like to elaborate on our assessment of growth and inflation. I would like to first focus on growth. The NSO's release on 30th November confirmed that the recovery of Indian economy is gaining traction, with real GDP growth at 8.4% year-on-year for Q2 21-22 and subsequent to 20.1% in the preceding quarter, that is in Q1 of this year. All components of GDP registered year-on-year growth, with exports and imports strongly surpassing their pre-COVID levels. Incoming information indicates that consumption demand has been improving, with pent-up demand getting reinforced by the festive season demand. Rural demand is exhibiting resilience and farm employment is picking up with robust performance of agriculture and allied activities, supported by a strong start to Rabi sowing, continuing direct transfers under Prime Minister Kisan scheme and extension of the free food grain under Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana till March 22. Urban demand has also shown signs of strengthening with spending on travel and tourism surging in the last few months. Other indicators like railway freight traffic, port cargo, GST receipts, toll collections, petroleum consumption and air passenger traffic have also picked up in October-November. The recent reductions in excise duty and state VAT on petrol and diesel should support consumption demand by increasing purchasing power. Government consumption is also picking up from August, providing support to aggregate demand. Enabling conditions for revival of investment activity are also falling into place. The production of capital goods remained above the pre-pandemic level for the third month in a row during September, while imports of capital goods increased by double digits during October for the 8th consecutive month. The central government's relaxation of additional market borrowings by states equivalent to 0.5% of GSDP of the respective states, subject to, of course, certain capex related milestones, and the decision to front load tax devolution are likely to bolster capital outlays of the states. The government's focus on capex should also crowd in private investment, which has remained in a prolonged state of muted activity. Further, there has been significant deleveraging of corporate balance sheets amidst congenial monetary and financial conditions engendered by the Reserve Bank of India's liquidity measures. Overall, the recovery that had been interrupted by the second wave of the pandemic is gaining traction, but it is not yet strong enough to be self-sustaining and durable. This underscores the vital importance of continued policy support. Downside risks to outlook have risen with the emergence of Omicron and renewed surges of COVID-19 infections in a number of countries. Besides, notwithstanding some recent corrections, headwinds continue to be posed by elevated international energy and commodity prices, potential volatility in global financial markets due to a faster normalization of monetary policy in advanced economies, and prolonged global supply bottlenecks. Considering all these factors, the projection for real GDP growth is retained at 9.5% in 21-22, consisting of 6.6% in Q3 and 6% in Q4 of 21-22. Real GDP growth is projected at 17.2% for Q1 22-23 and at 7.8% for Q2 22-23. I would now like to turn to inflation. Headline CPI inflation ticked up in October to 4.5% from 4.3% in September, after falling sharply between June and September.